The historical character is goodwife Susannah Ayres. She is the widow of John Ayres, the proprietor of the tavern in Brookfield. The time is about 3 a.m. on the morning of Wednesday, August 4th, 1675. The scene is the kitchen of the Ayres Tavern. It's a two-story house with the parlor and the great hall in the front half. The kitchen, the boiling room, the pantry are in the back part of the house. And the second floor is the usual sleeping area. John Ayres moved his family from Ipswich to the Quabog plantation back before May 1667. He worked with Susannah and his 7 sons, 1 daughter, another Susannah, to build a prosperous farm and a large house. From the beginning, they provided food and shelter for travelers passing along the path that led to Springfield. In 1671, John Ayres was granted a license to maintain a tavern in the house. During the years 1667 to 1673, he served on a committee appointed by the General Court of Massachusetts to oversee the formation of a local government. He was the town constable for a time, commander of the local militia troop responsible for protecting the small community against attack. It was in this capacity that John Ayres, along with William Pritchard and Richard Coy, went with Captain Wheeler, Captain Hutchinson, and 30 cavalry troopers to meet with the neighboring Indian tribe on Monday, August 2nd, 1675. The 3 local men and 5 of the troopers were massacred in a surprise attack along a trail in what is now New Braintree. When news of the massacre got back to Brookfield, all the people in the settlement took shelter in the Ayres Tavern for protection from the attack they feared was coming. About 80 people are sleeping wherever they can find a place.
The shooting seems to have stopped, at least for the moment. The Indians must be resting too, waiting for the dawn. I can hear some of the usual night sounds from outside. There's an owl hooting, and the distant howl of a wolf. What a nightmare these last days have been. Let me think. This would be Wednesday. Was it only Sunday we all felt so safe and happy? The crops were doing well. There was no sickness in the village. And Mary Trumbull was delivered of a baby boy that morning. And we were rejoicing that all had gone well with mother and child. Then Captain Wheeler and Captain Hutchinson arrived with about 20 men, just as we were sitting down for our noon meal. John invited them to join us, thanking God for their safe arrival. While Susannah and I cleaned up the kitchen afterwards, John and the officers went into the tavern room to talk. When he came through the kitchen later on his way outside to tend to the animals, I could tell he was upset. Soon after, I saw 4 soldiers ride out, headed northwest. I remember thinking, something serious is happening. They all looked so grim. I wish I could speak with John alone for a few minutes. But he was busy again with the men in the tavern, with no chance for us to discuss anything. I am so tired, but it is impossible for me to sleep. There are just too many people crowded into this house. Of course, we don't dare open the shutters, never knowing when the Indians will attack again. They're out there. They're out there. They're just waiting for us to show any signs of weakness. They're waiting for the opportunity to burn this house. Unless divine providence decides to spare us, I know we shall surely all die here. Should the Indians be successful in starting a large enough blaze along the house wall or in the roof thatching, we will have the choice of remaining in this burning building or facing the savages who wait without. They won't hesitate to put an end to each and every one of us as we flee the inferno, just as they murdered young Samuel Pritchard on Monday. I will carry that bloody scene with me for as long as I have memory. We women were huddled together, watching through the cracks in the closed shutters as Samuel went for a dish of supplies from his father's house down the road. The Indians seemed to appear out of nowhere. They caught Samuel. They cut off his head, and then they proceeded to kick it back and forth amongst them as if it were a ball. And when they tired of that, they placed it on a pole in front of his family's homestead. His poor mother fainted. To see such a sight, and this after just learning that her husband had been killed while out with Captain Wheeler's troops. She's overcome with grief. What words can one possibly say to offer comfort in such circumstances? I should be in like condition, but I just can't allow myself to think about John yet. Let's put aside any feelings until the end of this. Whatever that end turns out to be. I will mourn later, if we have a later. Otherwise, I shall be too heartsick to even move. All these people are depending on me to maintain this fortified house. I must provide for their needs. No one knows the food stores and the medicines I have here in the house. Oh, our daughter might be able to manage, but she's so young. She's so shaken by her father's death. I can't ask it of her. This burden and responsibility is mine. I must make myself stop thinking about what has happened. Thank heaven there's plenty of ground meal. John brought several barrels home from the mill just last week. And I have early onions and carrots stored in the coolness of the root cellar. And the cheeses that I made in the spring. Food is not an immediate problem. I am fortunate to have found this unoccupied kitchen corner. Just to be able to sit and rest my legs a bit. My knees ache. And I'm so tired. But I cannot sleep. Must begin to get my thoughts together to plan for what must be done this day. It is so hot. It is so hot and close in here. I feel like I can hardly get my breath. And the smells. Just too many people with barely enough room to turn from one side to the other. Some seem able to sleep, though. Thankfully, most of the children are asleep. They'll be frightened and hungry when they awake. There are 5 newborns now, with a second set of twins being born to the Kents. Must make sure those new mothers get enough to drink. I wish the well were closer to the house. After Thomas Wilson was wounded while trying to draw water, everyone is hesitant to try again. Somehow we have to have enough water for the new mothers and the children and the 6 wounded men. They are suffering so in this heat. And we have to have enough water to put out any small fires from the burning arrows the enemies are shooting into the roof thatching. As for the rest of us, we can drink ale to quench our thirst. There's plenty of that on hand. Definite advantage in having the fortified house in the tavern. I must be more tired than I realized to be having such unsuitable thoughts go through my head. Oh, John, how I wish you were here. You were so good, so fair-minded. You thought if you treated the Nipmunks fairly and honestly, they would do the same for the people of our settlement. None of us gave any thought to the fact that they might fight to keep their lands and tribal ways as it used to be before we came to settle here. Don't think they understand our English laws and manners. Just as we have no patience for their kind of life. And now, John, you have paid your Christian trust with your life, and with mine too. But my life can never be the same without you here to share it. If we do somehow survive this, how will I ever manage without you? I must stop these thoughts. They will destroy me. I must think only of the work to be done to care for the people sheltered here. If only we'd stayed in Ipswich. But it is foolish of me to think that way. We had 7 sons to think about. Where would they all find land to farm when the time came to set up their own households? All the good growing land in Ipswich was taken. John was working so hard to plan for the good of his family. The other men were too. That's what brought us here. Where now somehow we must do our best to hold on for as long as we can. I wonder, do the savages stop to think about the things that happened in their past? The events that brought them here, to this particular time and place, each of us fighting to the death to maintain our own familiar way of life, to pass our ways and our beliefs on to our children. Probably never have an answer to that question. Just another indication of how exhausted I am. My mind is going every which way. I can hear Henry Young's harsh breathing. He's been getting steadily worse since receiving the gunshot wound on Monday. He is dying. He is in so much pain. I have no medicine strong enough to help him to rest easier. Another difficulty, we won't be able to bury his body. In this terrible August heat, it will go bad quickly. Afterwards, I'll have some of the soldiers move him to the root cellar. But we won't be able to leave him there for more than a day. In one way, at least, Henry has been more fortunate than John and the others killed on the trail. Their bodies were left where they fell, unburied. Henry has had caring people with him to the end, and his remains will be safe from desecration, unless the savages prevail. I feel like my very soul is frozen within me. There are no feelings, only pain. I can't even begin to find the words to pray as I know an obedient servant of our God should be doing. Words that should come so easily, asking our Lord to spare his faithful servants. I think I used up all my prayers yesterday when there were so many small fires started by the fire arrows. I still can't believe that John is gone. That I'll never see him come through that door again, giving me his special smile, sharing a tidbit or just heard news. I can't help but ask, why these 3 good men, Lord? They worked hard. They took care of their families. They were always honest and trustworthy in any dealings with the neighboring Indians. They were so trusting in their relationships with the tribes, they even refused to carry arms to go to this meeting. 3 God-fearing men who gave their best to build a close community and to provide a good life for all who wished to work and settle on the Quabog plantation. Everything they worked for is gone now. For if we do somehow survive this, the life we knew is over. Oh, dear God, forsake us not in the days and hours ahead. Light is beginning to show around the window. I must be up and about. Time to check and see how the wounded are doing this morning. What conditions the mothers and the newborns are in. I don't even have any water to wash them properly. But before I do anything else, I best gather some of the women together to begin to prepare the day's food. I'm sure everyone will feel a bit better if they can have something to eat before facing all the uncertainties that will come with the daylight. Oh, dear God, please be with us. Give us the strength to meet each new trial that lies before us. Shooting has started again from up on the hill. I do so hope and pray that our ammunition and water supply outlast the Indians. I don't dare get too close to the window, but from what little I can see, it looks as if the Indians have barricaded themselves in the barn. They must have killed the cattle and the pigs we hadn't had there. I can see them lying on the ground. There's no movement. It's much too quiet and still. This is going to be a terrible day. It's already so hot. These agonies we are suffering must be what the fires of hell and damnation are like. You'll have to be vigilant now with Indians so close to the house, just across the yard. Standing here, worrying about what the day will bring accomplishes nothing. Better I busy myself with what needs to be done and to have faith in our Lord God. Must be as strong as I can for the family I have left. John would expect no less. I promise, though, if we are somehow delivered out of this, I will grieve and mourn John for the rest of my days. But for right now, I must think about making breakfast, starting the day.
Later, on that Wednesday afternoon, August 4th, 1675, the Indians launched their most forceful effort to dislodge the settlers from the garrison house. They had spent most of the day preparing a cart loaded with combustible materials, hay, flax, and wood. They arranged a series of long poles which they could use to push the burning cart from the barn to the corner of the house. There was no way the people inside the house would be able to put out the flames once the side walls and the overhanging roof caught fire. But a sudden, unexpected heavy rain shower undid the Indians' plans. The rain soaked the piled up incendiary pieces and wetted down the roof thatching.
The Lord has answered our prayers. Thanks be to God.
Later, at dusk, before the Indians could remove the dripping flax, hay, and wood from the cart and try again, the sound of a military trumpet was heard. Within minutes, a troop of 51 men, led by Major Willard and Captain Parker from Marlborough, rode into the yard. There was a brief skirmish, during which 3 soldiers were wounded and a horse was killed. This was the turning point of the 3-day siege. In the early hours of Thursday morning, the Indians withdrew. As they left, they burned all the unoccupied buildings. Once the siege was over, and the inhabitants knew they could plan again for the future, they all left the area. Goodwife Ayres, with her daughter and 7 sons, returned to Ipswich, where they still had family. In 1677, Goodwife Ayres petitioned the General Court for repayment for the supplies she had used to feed and shelter the troops at the fortified house during the siege. The court granted her request and paid her £6, 7 shillings and 7 pence. After the probate of John Ayres' estate, she received enough money to buy a house in Ipswich, where she died on February 2nd, 1682. She was probably in her mid-50s when she died. And so Susannah, true to her promise, had remained John Ayres' widow for more than 7 years. native people's histories and stories have been told by others, rather dispassionately, and not always with accuracy. Trudy Lamb Richmond, Shagatuk Elder, 1994. It is difficult for Algonquian people to speak or write about Metacom's rebellion, King Philip's War. When the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth in 1620, they were aided by Abenaki Bashaba Samoset, Pokanoket Chief Massasoit, Squanto, Hobomok, among others. Over 10,000 years of indigenous history had been preserved in oral traditions, place names, ritual and ceremony, and regular occupation of the homeland. Brookfield was part of the Nipmuc people's ancient territory. Ashkoash, the Green Garden Place, and Wickabog, the head of the pond, beside Massaquacumee, the Big Shaking Meadow. Territorial struggles between tribal groups had threatened the peace, but never the presence of native peoples. Yet, less than 60 years after the Pilgrim landing, Massasoit's son Metacomet led the bloodiest war in American history. It would claim over 5,000 Indian lives, 40% of the population, and at least 2,500 English. What went wrong? In 1836, Pequot William Apis, in his eulogy on King Philip, wrote, "The Pilgrims landed at Plymouth, and without asking liberty from anyone, they possessed themselves of a portion of the country and built themselves houses, and then made a treaty and commanded them to accede to it. This, if done now, would be called an insult, and every white man would be called to go out and act the part of a patriot to defend the country's rights." What started the rebellion? Was it that day in 1621 that Pilgrims broke into the grave of Massasoit's mother to steal the corn cached there? Was it when Captain Standish, at a feast with Wittamutmet, seized the chief's own knife, stabbed him, and severed his head to place it on a pole outside the English fort? Was it the devastating plagues and epidemics, the outrageous land sales, the duplicity of English courts? Was it the increasing European settlements and forced adaptations? Indian people had easily incorporated new languages, new trade goods, and new neighbors. Some, like the praying Indians at Natick, adopted English dress, homes, and even Christian beliefs. But it was harder to incorporate a worldview that changed the balance of power so dramatically. In a council with John Easton in 1675, Metacom complained that they had been the first in doing good to the English, and the English the first in doing wrong. If 20 of their honest Indians testified that an Englishman had done them wrong, it was as nothing. But if one of their worst Indians testified against any, that was sufficient. When a Christian Indian, John Sassamon, was murdered and 2 innocent Wampanoags were hanged, King Philip could restrain his warriors no longer. The histories of King Philip's War were written in blood and ink across the landscape as English and Indian lives fell to atrocities practiced on both sides. English ministers declared the war a struggle between civilization and savagery. Brookfield's captain cried, "God is with us and fights for us. He will deliver us out of the hands of these heathen." English accounts of Indian atrocities flooded the printing presses that just a few years previously had manufactured Algonquian Indian Bibles. English ink, English memory, and English settlers overran the homelands of Nipmuc, Wampanoag, Narragansett, Mohegan, Pequot, Abenaki, and other New England Indian tribal peoples. Indian attacks were symbolic and brutal, destroying goods and cattle, burning Bibles and all traces of English settlement. Their aim was to force English withdrawal from Indian lands. "You know, and we know, your heart grew sorrowful with crying for your lost many hundred men, and all your house and all your land, wrote one Christian Nipmuc, Peter Jethro. But the tribes were not united, as each chose a different course for community survival. The Iroquois refused assistance, while the Abenaki sheltered refugees. We Tamus Pocasets fought with Metacom, while Squaw Mashawongs pledged her Sakonut men to fight for the English captain Benjamin Church. By the war's end, monuments were being constructed. Not rock memory piles or stone markers, but Indian heads and hands, men and women quartered, displayed on pikes in the colonial towns. Peaceful praying Indians were sent to starve in internment camps or sold into slavery. Algonquian survivors withdrew to other parts of their homelands or northern mission villages. In the English records, Indian voices and memories retreated, and the process of reinterpreting the war began. King Philip's War became a touchstone, a rallying cry, a trial and triumph for the English immigrants. Local historians began recalling, recording, and eventually reenacting the struggles of King Philip's War. English minds remembered hair-raising accounts of Indian cruelty and captivity. Innocents slaughtered, brave heroes, bloody exploits, and the triumph of civilization over savagery. These were rendered in historical text, sermons, novels, and stage plays. In 1775, Reverend Nathan Fisk reminded Brookfield residents, instead of a desolate, uncultivated wilderness, swamps hideous and impassable, the face of the earth is trimmed and adorned with a beautiful variety of fields, meadows, orchards, and pastures. Instead of the smoky huts and wigwams of naked, swarthy barbarians, we now behold thick settlements of a civilized people. We are not anxious lest the frightful savage should spring from his thicket with his murderous tomahawk. Descendants of those savages persisted in New England despite the fears and misunderstandings of their neighbors. Many New England Indians fought beside the colonists through the French and Indian Wars and the Revolution, only to find their lands dispossessed by grants to white veterans. American popular culture conveniently wrote Indians into stereotypes and out of existence in novels like The Last of the Mohicans. Crèvecoeur declared, they have all disappeared, either in the wars which the Europeans waged against them, or else they have molded away, gathered in their ancient towns in contempt and oblivion. If these reassurances were not enough, from 1829 through 1887, one could view Shakespearean actor Edward Forrest as Metamora, or the last of the Wampanoags, dying on stage nightly. By the early 20th century, towns like Deerfield began staging commemorative pageants where descendants in theatrical Puritan dress relived Indian attacks and English triumphs. While the Algonquian population struggled to survive, New England Anglo-Americans were busily rewriting history. Through the 19th century, Indians were often described not as residents, but remnants. Not seasonal travelers, but homeless wanderers with no true, no written, no English authorized history. Although linguistically, culturally, and politically marginalized, Algonquian Indian peoples stayed on in New England despite declarations of disappearance. The Native Americans who preserved oral traditions were often judged as mere romantic storytellers with insufficient written documentation. Any English-authored book, any written history, whether fact or fiction, took such hold in the American imagination that for 300 years these writings have outweighed the native presence and the native perspective. Only now, in the last half of the 20th century, have scholars begun to realize that the native perspective has never changed. As Ella Sikatow declared in a 1993 Great Swamp Memorial Gathering, we are Narragansetts first, and we are Americans when it is convenient. We are still here, and all New England is still Algonquian homeland. March Bruchac, Abenaki Indian, October 1998, Benegavos, the leaf-falling moon.